What's going on, everybody? Super excited for this episode. Now, this is an episode, as I've been putting it together, I am absolutely intrigued and excited and digging through data and digging through stats and digging through pictures and digging through cards and digging through card prices. It's been really, really fun putting this one together. Now, it's been pretty time consuming, I've got to admit, because there are so many different components to what we put together here. And I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you remember back to last week, my question to all of you at the end of the episode was, who are 3 players that you think should be in the Hall of Fame or will get into the Hall of Fame, but aren't currently in the Hall of Fame? And it's an interesting topic, and it's interesting for a lot of reasons. Now, one of the reasons I find it interesting is we tend to be all about debating and talking about who got left out. Same thing with March Madness. Same thing with the bracket for the March Madness bracket. It's not so much about who's the 5 seed and who's the 7 seed. It's about who didn't get in that people think should be in, who got snubbed. For whatever reason, we're fascinated with this. And I am as well. And when you're talking about collecting cards, it's an interesting topic for a few reasons. Number one, a lot of people are always talking about Hall of Famers and collecting Hall of Famers and cards of Hall of Famers. But a lot of really, really good players kind of get left out because we're so focused on the Hall of Fame players. So what about the really, really good players who aren't in the Hall, but might make the Hall or might not? So one of the things that I do here is I take a look at each of the players that you all chose and you all commonly mentioned in your comments, and what their rookie cards are selling for in a variety of conditions and grades, and whether they be ungraded or graded. I think it's interesting how affordable some of them are. Now, another reason I think this is interesting is because some of us like to speculate about values. Now, some of us don't care about values at all, or at least they say they don't care about values at all. I think most people care to a certain extent. And the thing about cards is they go up in value when there's good news for a player, when somebody becomes more well-known, when something happens. But with retired players, with guys that maybe are even, have passed on, one of the few things that can affect their card prices is whether they then make the Hall of Fame. So if someone were to speculate who might make the Hall of Fame that isn't in now, it's really interesting because it could really affect their card prices. Now, if you talk about a guy like in the upcoming Hall of Fame ballot, Ichiro is going to make the Hall of Fame. The only thing that is going to be a question with Ichiro is whether or not he's unanimous, which I can't imagine. Why would he not be unanimous? But I don't expect Ichiro's cards to shoot up in value when it's announced that he made the Hall of Fame, because it's already kind of baked into the prices because we all know he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. But if you take a former player from a couple of generations ago, or maybe, 40, 50 years ago, and they suddenly make the Hall of Fame and nobody was really expecting it, it could really affect their prices because now they're a Hall of Famer and now they get more attention and they're on more people's radars. Not to mention all of the people who collect Hall of Famers. There are so many people that are into Hall of Fame runs. So if a player whose cards are in the 50s and 60s suddenly makes the Hall of Fame, there are a lot of people that are going to go out and buy those cards because they don't have them in their Hall of Fame run. And their rookie cards especially, because some people have rookie card Hall of Fame runs. It's something that's fun to talk about and speculate about, and it could dramatically affect the value of their cards. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at the 7 or 8, it's actually 8, guys that came up most frequently in your comments. Now, I kind of tainted the jury pool a little bit when I talked about Veda Pinson in last week's episode. So Veda Pinson is kind of included in a lot of the comments. So for just the sake of this particular episode, I didn't include him because a lot of people mention him because I mentioned him as a possibility. So we're going to look at the 8 people mentioned most from all of you. And included in this is going to be a little game where I give you some clues about the player, and we'll see if you can figure out who it is before I show you. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some of their rookie card values and some of your comments about those players and why they belong in the Hall. Let's take a look, but first, let's look at what the Hall of Fame says is the whole purpose of the Hall of Fame. Before we get too far into this, I want to look at the Hall of Fame's website at their mission statement of who belongs in the Hall of Fame. Their mission says, the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum is an independent, nonprofit, educational institution dedicated to fostering an appreciation of the historical developments of baseball and its impact on the culture by collecting, preserving, exhibiting, and interpreting its collections for a global audience, as well as honoring those who have made outstanding contributions to our national pastime. So with that said, let's take a look at the first person. See if you can figure out who this is. This person received the most votes and suggestions from all of you. A 7-time All-Star, an AL MVP, 2-time AL home run leader, 6 times had 30 or more home runs, won an AL RBI title, and has a career WAR of 70.2. Now that shows some dominance while playing, but also, 7 All-Stars tells us a story, and it is Dick Allen. And there is Dick Allen's rookie card. It is a dual player card, but it is still the rookie card of an all-time great slugger nonetheless. I agree that Pinson and Flood are deserving. However, I believe Dick Allen is the most deserving player of the era and not in the Hall. Lots of people will disagree with me on this, but Roger Maris should be in the Hall as well. It's hard to say who will get in. At this point, it seems that who is on the voting committee has more to do with who's getting in than anything else. Another comment says, for 3 vintage players, my obvious one is Dick Allen. Tying into cards a bit, he has quite a few league leaders cards and was an incredible hitter. Second, I would go with Lefty O'Doul. He was an amazing player, manager, and pioneer for Japanese baseball. Lastly, my homer pick is Jimmy Wynn. He's a long shot, but his numbers were hampered by playing in the Astrodome the majority of his career. The modern focus of OBP over average certainly helps his case. So, Dick Allen was the most mentioned guy from all of you. And I think there's a few reasons for that. Number one, he's been on veterans committees before. And, the veterans committee is always kind of changing their name. Now it's like the Eras Committee. But there have been twice that he missed by 1 vote. And that's super interesting that he could be that close twice. When you're that close twice, it kind of just leads you to believe the person's probably in. And why not? To hit 30 or more home runs in an era where 30 home runs was a ton of home runs, 6 times. This guy was a major slugger without a doubt. And, some players out there, maybe they're not getting in because of their personality. And some people are getting in because of their personality. And I think that there are certainly some attractors and detractors of Dick Allen because of his personality, which is interesting. Now, for me, when I'm looking at who I would vote for, some of their personality stuff, some of their likability, I think it's probably impossible to not include that when you're thinking about who you're going to cast a ballot for. But I sure hope that if I was in the position that I was voting, I would be looking at what their contributions were to the game and what their statistics and their abilities in the game were. Because again, if we look back at the mission of the Hall of Fame, it's about telling the story of the game and who made major contributions to it. And I don't know how you do that and not include a player like Dick Allen. So what are his cards selling for? So his rookie card in an ungraded condition, a pretty nice copy, nice X mint or so, recently sold on Greg Morris cards for $62.01. Well, on eBay, and the seller was Greg Morris cards. I mean, that's a pretty nice looking card, $62. Now, in a 6.5, I wanted to do a collector grade, but the closest I could find recently was this 6.5 for $121.50. And then a really nice one in a 7, or an extra nice one in a 7, was $223. So that is pretty affordable. All right, next person. See if you can figure out this person. Tied for the second most mentions. 5-time All-Star, 4-time Silver Slugger, 3-time Gold Glover, has 2,369 career hits and a career WAR of 75.1. So definitely was a great hitter for their position and a great fielder at their position. And that is a pretty phenomenal WAR. So who is that? It's Lou Whitaker. Several of you mentioned Lou Whitaker in last week's, or this week's comments, I should say. And there is a look at his rookie card as well. For 3 players who I think will make the Hall of Fame from the vintage era, I believe Lou Whitaker, Jerry Koosman, and Mickey Lolich will make it one day. These may not be big names from their eras, but they were talented players who were able to maintain long careers. Whitaker's double play partner Alan Trammell is in, and I feel Whitaker is the same exact player, if not slightly better. His skill set is identical, and I don't see how one player from the double play duo is in and the other is not. Another comment says, Hall of Famer for the future, Detroit Tigers second baseman Lou Whitaker, WAR of 75. So Lou Whitaker, I mean, to have a WAR of as high as 75, that says that not only were you an important player, a very productive player, but you did it for a long time. See, some of the players that you're going to see later were very good players, but they had kind of shortened careers, and the shortening of their career affected their WAR. But the Lou Whitaker WAR is really high to not be in the Hall of Fame. And as it was mentioned by one of those comments, it's like, how's he any different than Alan Trammell? I mean, they play different positions, but same team kind of they were kind of the same thing to a certain extent. Now, yeah, sure, the dynamics of parts of their game were a little bit different, but for the most part, how does one get in fairly easily and then one not get in? It makes you wonder what's going on there. Now, the other thing about a middle infielder is you have to take position into account. If Lou Whitaker was a first baseman and you look at some of his stat lines, you might go, okay, I understand why maybe he doesn't get in. But when you're a middle infielder, a big part of your game is more about, are you scoring runs? Are you playing defense? Are you making double plays that are helping the team? Are you doing things like that? More so than a guy like Dick Allen, who's just an absolute monster of power hitting for, a long time. So Lou Whitaker certainly seems like a guy that I think should probably be in. And the question with this one, though, is will it affect his rookie card that much? It's a multiplayer rookie card. It's a rookie card that's fairly easy to find. Now, is it fairly easy to find because he's not yet in the Hall of Fame? Or is it fairly easy to find because it's a rookie card from the late 70s. Kind of reminds me of the, Alan Trammell, Paul Molitor rookie card, which is, a different type of card because there's 2 Hall of Famers on it. But maybe more so like a Jack Morris, which is also same era. And you could buy a Jack Morris rookie card for, under $10, and he is in the Hall. So I'm not sure how much his cards will be affected. It certainly is possible that it would be affected some, but I just wonder if the supply would prevent it from really taking off like some of the other players we're going to see would be affected if they made the Hall of Fame. All right, so let's look at Lou Whitaker's rookie card. Now, his is a newer card. It's from 1978, and in ungraded condition, those are selling for under $8. In fact, I saw some even less than this one that sold for $7.95. And that is, I guess it's mostly because of the larger supply. In a 7 grade, one recently sold for $25 on the nose. That was through a pretty big seller. And then another big seller sold a PSA 9 for $188.50. So next up, try to figure this one out. Mentioned a lot. This is a 4-time All-Star. Has a career 288 wins. That might be a giveaway for some of us. 2,245 career strikeouts, a 3.34 career ERA, and a career WAR of 62.1. Now, to accumulate that many wins and strikeouts, this was a lengthy career. But the 3.34 career ERA, and it is none other than Tommy John. Now, I couldn't mention some of his other contributions. Obviously, it'd give it away. Thurman, Munson, Tommy John, and Curt Flood. I would agree with the Dick Allen suggestion as well. Seems most of us are in agreement. And the reason for my picks is because each one has historical significance. While some players mentioned maybe we can argue if they have the statistics, they certainly do have, like I stated, historical significance. And it's hard to tell the story of baseball, in my opinion, without these kinds of players and the story they have too. Hey Greg, great video as always. Looking forward to them every week. 3 guys that I think will get in are Tommy John, Dick Allen, and Steve Garvey. But 3 guys that I think need to be in, but probably won't anytime soon, are Thurman Munson, Roger Maris, and Pete Rose. I honestly think it's ridiculous that Rose hasn't gotten in yet. And considering guys like Harold Baines, Scott Rowland, and Todd Helton are getting in, is a shame that Munson and Maris are being overlooked. So Tommy John, every ball player, every current ball player knows of Tommy John because of the surgery that he went through. And remember, this is an experimental surgery. When he does that surgery, he's risking his career to have that surgery. And it completely revolutionizes the pitching position. You know, there are so many players that have had the surgery. It has allowed so many players to continue pitching. And he took a risk and he proved that it could work. And they've gotten so good at the surgery now that when they do the ligament surgery, a lot of guys, most guys come back and they actually throw harder. Now, he missed a season for it, plus, and he just missed 300 wins. Now, do you think if he gets to 300 wins, do you think he still doesn't make the Hall of Fame? Because, 300 wins is sort of like the whole 3,000 strikeouts, 400, 500 home runs. I mean, it's one of those numbers that kind of gets you in. He probably gets those 12 wins if he doesn't miss a season of injury. It's an interesting thought, but then again, when you go back to the original comment, that's one of the reasons I showed that original comment from the mission of the Hall of Fame. It's to tell the story of the game and to honor the people who made major contributions to it. How do you have a Hall of Fame without a guy with the contributions at the level of Tommy John? I think he gets in, and I think he's a player that if he gets in, because of the age of his rookie card, I think there could be a pretty decent jump in values if he were to make it. And I think that he probably will at some point. It's just a matter of when, in my opinion. All right, so what is a Tommy John rookie card selling for? Now, it's from the 64 set, so it's a little older than that Whitaker. An ungraded one in pretty decent, again, ex-mint condition from GMC Card, Craig Morris Cards, $14.50. In a 6, $35. That's so affordable. And in a 7, this is a 7 that sold through Probstein, with $63. So very affordable rookie card. All right, so who is next on our list? This person also tied for the second most votes. It's a 3-time All-Star, so just 3 All-Stars, but 7-time Gold Glover, a career batting average of .293, and a career WAR of 41.9, but was mentioned quite a few times. Who do you think this one might possibly be? It might be somebody who had some other contributions than just on the field. And when you look at Curt Flood, he certainly had a lot of contributions besides just as a player. My 3 non-Hall guys, who I think are deserving of the Hall, have to go with Ken Boyer, Tommy John, and Curt Flood. For 2 reasons. He was a very fine player, and what he did for all of his future comrades, getting them the recognition and money they deserved. Another commenter says, Veda Pinson, Dick Allen, and Curt Flood are pretty solid picks. Allen and Flood aren't in because they were essentially blackballed and unliked by the powers that be. And here's another guy, when you talk about contributions to the game, and not just the game of baseball, but really sports, that you have largely because of something that this guy spearheaded. And not only did he spearhead it, but to his own detriment. I mean, how did that affect how long he got to play? How did that affect how much time he missed? You see a lower WAR here than some of the other names that we've seen. And the lower WAR is certainly because his career was shorter and he missed some time because of all that he went through for other players. But when you win as many Gold Gloves as he did, he was certainly an outstanding defensive player. And for whatever reason, it does seem like there are players out there that don't get Hall of Fame love that were fantastic defensive players. And, you know, there are a few, but they're the flashy defensive players like an Ozzie Smith. I mean, take a guy like Omar Vizquel. I mean, I don't know how he's not in the Hall of Fame. But a great defensive player, a great contributor to players' rights, and changing the whole trajectory of pay for players and rights of players, who was an outstanding player and had his career shortened because of it. I think he's a guy that's just got to get in at some point. And you got to wonder, is the likability factor, is the fact that he was a thorn in the side of some of those executives and some of those, baseball groups, is that the reason he's not in? Because at some point, they've got to take a step back and go, he should be in. And if he does get in, I have to believe that the appreciation level for him and his cards would go way up and would have a lot of speculation. Now, again, this is not an investment channel by any means. I am not suggesting you should go sell your house and take all the assets and buy a bunch of Curt Flood rookie cards. But it does seem like a guy that if he got in, I would think there would certainly be a boost in the value of his cards. So Curt Flood's rookie card is from the 58 set. So we went from the 70s with Whitaker, 60s with Tommy John, and now the 50s for Curt Flood. Ungraded, a really nice looking one, $28 in a buy it now. One in a PSA 5 holder, sold for $46.55 at auction. And then in a PSA 7, really high grade for a card in 58, sold for $181.50. So clearly very affordable still for a guy who made some major contributions. So next up, tied for the 5th most votes, this person's a 7-time All-Star, won an MVP award, 3-time Gold Glover, a career batting average of .292, and a career WAR of 46.1. So who might this one be? Good defensively, good offensively, constant all-star, and an MVP, so played on some pretty good teams. So when you think back, you think you got this one? Yes, it is Thurman Munson. Now, obviously Thurman Munson's career was shortened, which we'll talk about a few times today. There are a few vintage players who could see a bump in their card values if they make the Hall of Fame. Dick Allen, Dave Parker, Curt Flood, Thurman Munson, and Lou Whitaker are the position players who come to mind first. Pete Rose cards are already priced as if he was in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. Luis Tiant and Tommy John are two pitchers who come to mind. Lou Piniella cards could see a bump, assuming he makes the Hall of Fame as a manager. So a common theme that has shown up and is going to continue to show up in these remaining choices that all of you pointed out is the group of players whose careers were shortened. And when your career is shortened, it's hard for me to kind of hold it against you. Now, if you chose to retire early because you just, wanted to avoid injury or further injury, if you decided to just spend time with your family, I can kind of understand that. What if those were your reasons? But when the reason that your career was cut short is because you died in a horrific accident, that's tough. That's tough to hold against a guy. You've got a guy who won an MVP. You've got a guy who's a constant all-star, a constant Gold Glover, a leader on a very good team. And he doesn't make the Hall of Fame because he died. He died. That's the reason he's not in the Hall of Fame. If he gets to finish his career, he's obviously going to make the Hall of Fame. And this is at a position that doesn't get love and appreciation as it is. I mean, when I see these pictures of Thurman Munson with his, orange, his orange chest protector, and he just looks like a warrior. He just looks like he's been through battle. And the guy dies in an accident. And I wasn't there when it happened, obviously. But when he dies in his accident, the story is that he was stuck. He was stuck in the plane, and other people had gotten out, and he told them to get away to save themselves because they couldn't get him out, and they were going to risk themselves to get him out. I mean, but you don't get in the Hall of Fame. I don't get this one. Out of all of them, this one seems to me maybe the most egregious choice to not be in the Hall of Fame. I think it's an outstanding choice by all of you that mention him. I think he's got to get in. So what does a Thurman Munson rookie card sell for? Well, recently at Greg Morris Cards on eBay, pretty nice looking one in my eyes. I mean, it's not perfect. Sold for $32 at auction. How about this one in a 6? $82.97. That seems like a really good deal. And then one in a PSA 8 sold for $615. So if you go up to one in the 6 range, you're getting it under $100 for an all-time great. All right, next up, see if you can figure it out. This is the 5th most votes tie again. 11-time All-Star, won an NL MVP, a 5-time Gold Glover, won an NL RBI title, and has a really nice career WAR of 62.8. So who might this be? To make 11 All-Star games, that's interesting. 5 Gold Gloves, so obviously good defensively and good offensively with the production winning an RBI title. None other than Ken Boyer. And there's a look at Ken Boyer's rookie card, an outstanding third baseman. Vada Pinson and Curt Flood are excellent examples. Growing up in St. Louis, Curt Flood, without a doubt, was a would-to-be Hall of Famer until his trade to Philadelphia and his quest for free agency. When I watched Vada Pinson in Cincinnati as a teammate of Frank Robinson, to me they were equals, both incredible hitters and fielders. I have a signed rookie card of both these men and a game-used bat of Vada Pinson. 3 others I believe should be in the Hall of Fame are Ken Boyer, Dick Allen, and Dick Groat. Ken Boyer was the MVP in 1961 and captain of the great Cardinal team of 1964 that beat the Yankees as he hit a timely grand slam. Dick Allen may be outspoken, but what a talent. And Dick Groat, an outstanding major leaguer, MVP for the Pirates, and great shortstop for the 1964 St. Louis Cardinals. Another commenter says, the third pick for me is Ken Boyer. His career was cut short by his bad back, and he really only played 12 full seasons. In his career, he amassed a 62 WAR, an MVP, 5 Gold Gloves, and 11 All-Star appearances. 2 All-Star games a season during that period, though. 2,143 hits, 282 home runs, 1,141 RBIs, and a .287 career batting average. Looks pretty good to me in an underrepresented position in the Hall of Fame. Now, again, some of the comments are fantastic. I mean, in some of these comments, you guys just continue to lay out the explanation as to why they belong. And it's hard for me to come in and say much more than was already said, like was just done there. But you've got a productive hitter and you've got an outstanding defensive player. All right. And made a lot of all-star games. And sure, as it's pointed out in one of the comments, this is during that time that there were a couple of all-star games. They were raising money for some of the groups of the pension program and stuff. But at the same time, you know, even if you take out the couple of extra all-star games that are in there because a couple of the years he got 2, we have to, just like with the Lou Whitaker thing, you have to consider the position that somebody played. And this is not a time where there were a ton of super productive hitters at third base. You know, we have a few. There are a few. It came later that third base ended up becoming, in a lot of cases, a more powerful hitter, a slugger type guy. Again, there are a couple before, you know, at this time. But you have to consider the position at which somebody plays. Now, if you look at his stats, and he's a first baseman, again, like with Lou Whitaker, maybe the argument's a little bit tougher, but when the guy is playing a position like third base, he's outstanding defensively, he's very, very good offensively, and he's a third baseman, and he carries all of these stats. I don't know. I don't really get it. And as we're going to see in a second, when you look at the prices of his rookie cards, very affordable. If he were to get in, I think there would certainly be a jump. Now, you know, to someone like a Thurman Munson like we just had, I kind of understand his prices might not go up that much because of the legend of Thurman Munson. There's already some extra stuff, you know, cooked into the price. But with a guy like Ken Boyer, I think if he gets in, I think you could see a pretty decent jump. You know, I don't think it's like it would double, but I think there would be a fairly big jump in his values. Now, will he get in? I don't know. I'm not as convinced that Ken Boyer gets in. I think I would vote for him in if I was on, you know, the Eras committee. I think he belongs in, but I think that he's better than a lot of people that are in. But will he get in? I don't know. Again, it's just fun to talk about. It's fun to speculate about. But I think the guy's good enough to be a Hall of Famer. And at the very least, again, they don't have to be a Hall of Famer to buy their cards. This is a really, really good player, and his card is super affordable. So much so, let's take a look and see how affordable it is. So the rookie card for Ken Boyer is from the 1955 set, which obviously has some big ones in Clemente, Koufax, and Killebrew. Here's a really nice-looking one, ungraded, for $43 at auction. A PSA 5, which is another beautiful-looking one, well-centered at $82. And a PSA 7. I mean, we're talking about a really nice card from 55 for $121.09. That seems extremely affordable. All right, so next up, this is somebody with 7 All-Star appearances, a 2-time NL batting champ, 2 times. Also won an NL MVP, has 3 gold gloves, 3-time Silver Slugger, and has a career WAR of 40.1. So this is an outstanding hitter to win multiple batting titles and then an MVP and make that many different All-Star teams. So who do you think this one is? Well, this one might surprise, maybe not. I don't know where you stand, but Dave Parker, I think, is a terrific choice as a future Hall of Famer. I mean, just looking at that stat line is extremely impressive. My 3 choices for future Hall of Famer are Richie Allen, Steve Garvey, and Dave Parker. Allen came 1 vote shy of induction, not once, but twice. Garvey and Parker were dominant players for historic franchises and had a huge moments in the postseason and All-Star games. So there's a couple of things in here that I find especially interesting about Dave Parker. Number one, the guy made All-Star games over 3 decades. If I'm not mistaken, he made an All-Star game in 1990 as well. And he was making them, and he was, winning MVPs and batting titles in the 70s. The guy could absolutely hit. Now, one of the things that's super interesting, I mean, to me, this is just my personal opinion. Winning a batting title is a really big deal. We got tons of players. We've got tons of players. And you have the best batting average. Now, to do that twice, to twice have a better batting average than everyone else in the league. Everyone else in the league twice. That's a really difficult thing to do. Now, sometimes it's a couple of bounces one way or another. It's a close competition to win a batting title. He did it twice. It's like, how Dale Murphy wins a couple of MVPs. You win one MVP, you go, it's one MVP, But even that's voted on. When you have a stat like a batting title that everybody is a contender in. Now, not everyone's a home run hitter, right? But everyone can hit. And you have the best batting average twice. You make that many All-Star games. You win an MVP. You're a 2-time batting title champ. And even in the late 80s, when he's playing on the A's, he's been in the league for, nearly 20 years, and he still could absolutely crush the ball. Is it an off-the-field thing? Is it some of the stuff he was affiliated there? Because, again, for me, I don't know how you don't have a contributor and a person who was as good at what he did as Dave Parker not be in the Hall of Fame. It just doesn't make any sense to me. This one should be for sure. I will say this. It'll be interesting to see what happens to his rookie card because it's early enough in the 70s that they aren't as plentiful. But it's not like it's a rookie card from, the 50s. This one would be interesting, but boy, are his rookie cards affordable, as we're going to take a look at right now. So what do his rookie cards sell for? Well, his rookie is again from the 70s, which certainly affects the price some, but the 74 Topps All-Star ungraded recently sold from Greg Morris Cards at $8.55. His rookie card in a PSA 7, $45 at auction recently. How about in an SGC 8? Well, $69. Under $70 for an SGC 8 Dave Parker rookie card seems pretty darn affordable. All right, my last person that you all chose, also tied for 7th, is a 6-time All-Star, won an MVP, won 9 Gold Gloves, and also won a batting title. So this guy could hit, and he also was an outstanding defender. A career WAR of 42.4 is probably something that hurts him, but that's largely because of the shortness of his career. But 6 All-Star games during that shortened career. Who's this one? Well, this is one a lot of you probably figured out is Don Mattingly. And there is his 84 Topps rookie card. Great answers from the community. Regardless whether I agree with them or not, they made great arguments to support their positions. My 3 vintage era players not in the Hall of Fame that I think will be someday, or at least should be, who knows how these Veterans Committee voters think. Joe Jackson, Don Mattingly, is he vintage? I'm old. Smokey Joe Wood, great video. Also, another commenter says, Curt Flood, Thurman Munson, Lou Whitaker, Don Mattingly, and Bernie Williams, not in the hall yet, but soon, I think. Now, I personally would, be totally on board with the Mattingly thing. It's clearly a homer pick. If I were choosing it, I didn't vote here. I didn't choose it. You all mentioned Mattingly a lot, and because of it, Mattingly is included. This guy was one of the best hitters in the game over 10 years. One of the best defensive players, certainly the best. Well, some Keith Hernandez fans would probably throw tomatoes at me, but in my opinion, Mattingly's as good defensively as any first baseman during his era. You might make the argument of, Keith Hernandez, but at least certainly in the American League, Don Mattingly is there. So as a person who values defense a lot, I think more than Hall of Fame voters do, and was an amazing hitter and a clutch guy. I mean, the grand slams. And it's an interesting one to leave out Don Mattingly. Now, again, there are some similarities to some of the other players. Thurman Munson, Ken Boyer, Curt Flood, because those guys had shorter careers. And because they had shorter careers, they do have lower WARs than some of the other guys like the Lou Whitakers, and the Dick Allens that were mentioned. Their WAR is certainly lower. But part of the reason for that is they weren't able to accumulate as much. Now, in Thurman Munson's case, it was completely not his fault. Boyer and Mattingly battled injuries. And because they battled injuries, that's why their career was shortened. But you cannot tell me that if Don Mattingly has had as long of a career as Harold Baines, that Don Mattingly wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. You can't tell me that. And some people will say that's part of it. Being durable, being able to last, being able to produce over a long period of time is part of the criteria. And to me, I understand that point of view, but at the same time, I don't know how we can hold certain things against people. And a shortened career, because of something out of their personal control, I have a hard time holding against someone. This is a premier hitter and premier defensive player for a decade and not in the Hall of Fame. How do you tell the story of the 1980s and hitting and not include Don Mattingly? I don't think you can. I don't think you can. Now, what do his cards sell for? We've seen so far that the newer cards sell for a lot less, and a lot of that I think is because of the larger supply. So a recent ungraded, very nice copy of Don Mattingly's 84 Topps rookie card sold for $13.50 in an SGC 8 at auction. One recently sold for $26. And how about in an SGC 9? Well, one of those sold for under $55 at $54.97. So what did you guys think? I thought that was a super fun episode. Man, was it fun putting it together. It was really fun going through all of your comments and seeing who you thought deserved to get in and has not yet gotten in. And, you know, whether you just like to think about and speculate Hall of Famers and who should be in, or whether you watch this and think, oh, well, there are some guys in there that I think will get in and their cards would go up, or that's irrelevant to you because you just collect cards of the guys that you like, it doesn't really matter. But it's just a fun conversation to have. It's fun to speculate. It's fun to talk about. At least it is for me. And all of your contributions are what made this episode a lot of fun. So, what's the question for this coming week? I'm excited about this one as well. Now, I want you to think of about 4 decades. 3-4 decades in which you kind of collect. Or even if you don't collect, maybe you're just a 1950s collector, you're certainly going to be aware of some other decades. There are cards that just help tell the story, not of baseball, but of baseball cards. There are cards that just kind of, when you think of an era, you think of that card. So here's my question for this week. If we think over a handful of decades, what is one card from each of those decades that you think every card collection kind of needs? Because it's an important one. Now, don't come at me and say a 1952 Mickey Mantle, because that's not going to happen for the overwhelming majority of us. But what card, for example, from the 1950s, do you think helps kind of tell the story? Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'll just use an example. From the 1980s, I kind of feel like most everybody's collection needs an 89 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. How do you have cards from the 80s and not have that card represented? That would be an example of the kind of thing I'm looking for. A card that is attainable for us, but also every vintage collection or even just card collection really kind of needs to make it complete. I look forward to hearing your responses and sharing them next week, because this is going to be eye-opening for a lot of us. I think a lot of us are going to see some cards that we didn't realize that we needed, but we actually probably do once somebody turns us on to them. Please leave your comments below. I look forward to seeing them. I look forward to sharing them next week.